Imagine waking up one morning and noticing something small has changed. Your chest feels lighter, your phone buzzes less, and you no longer rehearse conversations in your head just to survive the day. That change didn't come from drama, from a confrontation, or from ghosting everyone. It came from doing one thing, setting a firm boundary, and then protecting it. That single act, saying no to what drains you and yes to what fills you, is the switch that makes toxic people stop showing up in your life. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your peace, your energy, and your sense of self-worth. They are not walls to shut people out, but guidelines that show others how you want to be treated. When you don't set boundaries, you open the door for toxic people to walk all over your kindness, manipulate your emotions, and take advantage of your time. But the moment you put up a firm boundary, something powerful happens. Toxic people begin to lose interest because the game they once played no longer works on you. That is why boundaries are the single most important key to making toxic people disappear. Think of boundaries as a fence around a beautiful garden. Without a fence, anyone can trample through, pull up the flowers, and leave the soil barren. But when you put up a fence, you decide who can enter, how long they can stay, and what behavior is allowed. Toxic people are like weeds. They thrive in unguarded spaces. Once you install a strong fence, they stop growing in your garden because there's no space left for them to thrive. One of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing kindness with endless availability. We think saying yes to everyone makes us loving, generous, or strong, but in reality, saying yes when you want to say no drains your spirit and makes you vulnerable to manipulation. Toxic people can smell that vulnerability from a mile away. They look for people who are too afraid to speak up, too guilty to say no, or too desperate for approval. Boundaries, however, act like a shield. When you say, "This is what I will allow, and this is what I won't," you instantly take away the power they thought they had over you. For example, imagine a friend who only calls when they need something. They borrow money, dump their problems, or ask for favors, but they never show up for you. If you keep giving without boundaries, that friend will keep taking because toxic people rarely stop themselves. But the moment you set a boundary, "I can't lend you money anymore," or "I don't have the energy to talk right now," they're forced to face reality. They can either respect your limits, or they'll move on to someone else who will tolerate their behavior. Either way, your peace is protected. Boundaries don't need to be loud or aggressive. In fact, they are most effective when they are calm and consistent. A toxic coworker, for instance, might constantly try to dump extra tasks on you. Instead of getting into a heated argument, you could calmly say, "I don't have the capacity to take that on, but maybe you can ask our manager for support." That simple line is a boundary. If they try again tomorrow, you repeat the same boundary. Eventually, they realize you're not the person they can exploit. Slowly, they stop targeting you. It's also important to understand that setting boundaries is not about changing toxic people. It's about changing yourself. You cannot control whether someone respects you, but you can control whether you allow their disrespect to continue. When you set a boundary, you're telling yourself, "I deserve respect. I deserve peace. I deserve relationships that uplift me." That mindset alone begins to shift the kind of people who stay in your life. Toxic people disappear not because they've suddenly transformed, but because you've stopped giving them permission to feed off your energy. Yes, the first time you set a boundary, it may feel uncomfortable. You might feel guilty, anxious, or afraid of conflict. Toxic people may even react with anger, guilt, trips, or manipulation to test your resolve. But the more you practice, the stronger you get. And over time, you'll notice that your world becomes quieter, calmer, and filled with people who genuinely respect you. Boundaries are not selfish. They are self-care. They are not punishment. They are protection. They are not rejection. They are redirection away from toxicity and toward respect, love, and peace. So if you want toxic people to disappear from your life, don't waste energy fighting them, fixing them, or pleasing them. Do the one thing that always works: set clear, consistent boundaries and watch them fade from your world. Toxic people survive and succeed in one environment more than any other: confusion. Ambiguity is their playground. When expectations are unclear, when you're unsure about your own limits, or when you send mixed signals, toxic people use that fog to their advantage. They manipulate, twist words, and shift blame until you start doubting yourself. But when you set firm boundaries, You remove that fog and shine a spotlight of clarity on the situation. That clarity takes away their favorite tool, manipulation. Let's break it down. Ambiguity happens when you don't clearly express your needs, your limits, or your expectations. For instance, maybe you don't want to lend money to a relative, but you're too afraid to say no directly. Instead, you say, maybe another time, or let me think about it. That unclear answer is all the invitation a toxic person needs. They'll push harder, guilt trip you, or bring it up again until you cave in. Why? Because you left the door halfway open. Ambiguity gave them permission to walk through. Now imagine the same situation, but this time you respond with clarity. I can't lend you money. Period. No extra excuses, no long explanations. That boundary is sharp and simple. A toxic person might not like it, but they can't twist it, misinterpret it, or manipulate it. You've taken away the fog they thrive in. Toxic people are experts in blurring lines. They joke at your expense and then say, relax, I was only kidding. They insult you but hide it behind sarcasm. They ask for small favors that keep growing bigger. They make promises they never keep and then blame you for expecting too much. All of this works only if you allow the lines to stay blurry. When you're unsure of where you stand, they're happy to redraw the lines for you, always in their favor. This is why clarity is your strongest weapon. Clarity doesn't leave room for manipulation. Clarity tells the other person exactly what you expect and what you will not tolerate. For example, instead of, I don't like it when you're kind of rude, say, do not speak to me with insults. Instead of, I'd appreciate if you help more, say, I need you to do your share of this work or I won't be able to continue taking it on. Instead of, I don't know if I can make it, say, I won't be available then. Notice the difference. The first statements are soft, vague, and easy to bend. The second ones are clear, firm, and impossible to confuse. Of course, clarity takes courage. Many of us avoid being clear because we fear conflict. We worry about offending people, sounding harsh, or pushing them away. Toxic people exploit that fear. They count on you to soften your words, to backtrack, to leave loopholes they can wiggle through. But here's the truth. Being unclear may keep the peace in the moment, but it creates chaos in the long run. Being clear may cause discomfort in the moment, but it creates peace in the long run. When you start practicing clarity, you'll see immediate shifts. Toxic people will try to test your boundaries at first. They may argue, guilt trip, or act offended. But over time, they'll realize there's no wiggle room with you. You mean what you say. And when that happens, they'll either adjust to your standard or leave your life. Either outcome is a win. Clarity also does something beautiful for you. It builds confidence. Each time you clearly state your needs, you reinforce the belief that your voice matters. You stop over-explaining, stop apologizing for existing, and start standing tall in your truth. That confidence makes toxic people deeply uncomfortable because it means you're no longer easy to control. Think of clarity as a light switch. Ambiguity is the dark room where toxic people hide, pulling strings and playing tricks. But once you flip the switch on with a clear boundary, the darkness vanishes. They can no longer pretend, hide, or confuse you. The manipulation ends where your clarity begins. So if you want toxic people to disappear, stop giving them gray areas to play in. Speak with precision. Decide what you will and won't accept. Make your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Toxic people can thrive in confusion, but they cannot survive in clarity. One of the biggest myths people carry is that setting and enforcing boundaries makes you selfish, unkind, or even cruel. Many of us were raised to believe that good people always say yes, always help, and never walk away. But this belief is exactly what toxic people exploit. They rely on your fear of being seen as mean, so they can drain your energy without consequence. The truth is, enforcing boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is the highest form of self-respect, and without it, you can never create a healthy, balanced life. Think of it like this: if you never lock your front door, people can walk in whenever they want. A thief might enter, take what they want, and leave you feeling violated. Would anyone call you cruel for locking your door? Of course not. They'd call it common sense. Boundaries are the locks on the doors of your life. They protect your time, your energy, and your mental peace. Enforcing them isn't about punishing others, it's about protecting yourself. Here's the problem: many people set boundaries but never enforce them. They'll say, I don't want to be spoken to disrespectfully, but when someone crosses the line, they laugh it off or let it slide. Toxic people notice that weakness immediately. They know your words mean nothing without action, and so they continue to push. That's why enforcement is the real power of a boundary. Without action, a boundary is just a wish. With action, it becomes a rule. For example, imagine you have a friend who constantly interrupts you or dismisses your feelings. You set a boundary by saying, "I'd like to finish my thoughts without being interrupted." But the next time it happens, you don't stop them. You just feel upset inside. The message they receive is that your boundary isn't serious. But if you calmly pause, say, "I'll continue once you let me finish," and hold your ground, they begin to understand you're not playing. The enforcement shows them you respect yourself enough to demand respect from them. Enforcement doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to yell, threaten, or cut people off at the first mistake. Often, enforcement is quiet and consistent. It's hanging up the phone when someone shouts at you. It's refusing to respond to guilt-tripping messages. It's walking away from conversations that turn toxic. Each action communicates one thing: I value myself too much to stay in this. That is not cruelty, it's clarity. Some people will try to convince you otherwise. They'll call you selfish, cold, or uncaring when you enforce your boundaries. That's because your boundaries expose their behavior. Toxic people don't like limits because it means they can no longer control you. Their discomfort isn't proof you're wrong, it's proof you're growing stronger. The moment you stop feeling guilty for protecting yourself is the moment you step into true self-respect. Enforcing boundaries also teaches people how to treat you. Humans learn through repetition. If every time someone tries to cross your line, you calmly enforce it, they eventually adapt. Healthy people will adjust and respect your new standards. Toxic people, on the other hand, will either explode or fade away. Either way, your enforcement cleanses your life of people who refuse to honor your worth. It's also important to understand that enforcing boundaries doesn't just protect you, it inspires others. When you stand firm, you give permission for others around you to do the same. A coworker watching you refuse extra unpaid tasks may find the courage to speak up next time. A friend who sees you walk away from disrespect may realize they don't have to tolerate it either. Enforcement creates a ripple effect of self-respect. At its core, enforcing boundaries is an act of love, love for yourself and love for the relationships that matter. Without boundaries, resentment builds. You give and give until you're empty, and then you blame the other person for taking too much. But when you enforce your limits, you keep the relationship balanced and honest. People know where they stand with you, and you no longer feel used or resentful. That clarity builds healthier, stronger connections. So remember this: every time you enforce a boundary, you're not being cruel, you're choosing respect. Respect for your time, your energy, your values, and your life. If someone calls you selfish for protecting yourself, let them. The ones who truly love and value you will never ask you to shrink, bend, or suffer just to make them comfortable. Enforcement is not punishment, it's protection. And it's not cruelty, it's the clearest sign that you finally respect yourself enough to live in peace. When dealing with toxic people, many imagine the solution is one big confrontation, standing face to face, delivering a powerful speech, and finally putting them in their place. Movies and stories often glamorize the dramatic showdown, but in real life, confrontation rarely works the way we expect. Toxic people thrive on drama. They twist your words, turn the tables, and leave you feeling more drained than before. That's why the real power doesn't come from one loud confrontation. It comes from quiet, steady consistency. Consistency is about aligning your actions with your words again and again until there is no doubt about your limits. When you say, "I won't tolerate this," and you act on it every single time, toxic people quickly learn there's no wiggle room with you. Confrontation may win a battle, but consistency wins the war. Let's look at an example. Imagine a coworker keeps dumping their unfinished work on you. A confrontation might sound like yelling at them in frustration one day, "Stop using me to your job!" But toxic people are experts at deflecting in those heated moments. They might say, "I thought you were a team player," or play the victim. "I just have too much on my plate." Suddenly, you're painted as the unreasonable one. That one big confrontation didn't solve anything. Now imagine a consistent response instead. Each time they try to hand you work, you calmly reply, "I don't have the capacity for this. Please speak with the manager." No drama, no yelling, just the same answer every single time. At first, they may push harder, trying to guilt you into saying yes, but when your response never changes, they eventually realize their tactic doesn't work. You've trained them with consistency, not confrontation. Toxic people are like children testing limits. If a child screams in a store and gets candy once, they'll keep screaming every time, hoping to win again. But if every single time the answer is calm and firm, no candy, the child learns that tantrums won't work. Toxic adults operate the same way. If you sometimes enforce your boundary and sometimes let it slide, they'll keep testing you. But if you're steady and predictable, they eventually stop. Consistency also protects your energy. Confrontations are exhausting. They leave you replaying the conversation, doubting what you said, and feeling emotionally spent. But consistency requires less energy because you're not reinventing the wheel each time. You already know your boundary and you already know your response. Like muscle memory, it gets easier the more you practice. It's also important to note that consistency isn't about being harsh. You don't need to raise your voice, explain endlessly, or defend yourself. A consistent boundary can be delivered calmly, even kindly. For instance, I'm not available at that time. I don't lend money. I won't continue this conversation if it turns disrespectful. Short, clear, repeated. Over time, these consistent responses carry far more power than any dramatic speech. The real magic of consistency is that it shifts the dynamic. Toxic people rely on your unpredictability. They thrive when they can catch you off guard, guilt you into exceptions, or confuse you into breaking your own rules. But when your behavior is steady, they lose their grip. They realize that no matter what trick they use, anger, guilt, charm, the outcome is always the same. That predictability takes away their control. Consistency also sends a powerful message to yourself. Each time you hold the line, you prove to yourself that your boundaries are real and worthy of respect. You build trust with yourself. That self-trust is priceless because it makes you stronger, calmer, and less reactive. The more consistent you are, the less tempting it becomes to get pulled into arguments, explanations, or guilt traps. You simply don't play the game anymore. Does this mean confrontation is always useless? Not necessarily. There are times when a firm, direct statement is needed to establish the boundary. But without consistency, even the best confrontation falls flat. Words may start the process, but consistency enforces it. So remember this: toxic people don't disappear because of one big outburst. They disappear when they realize you cannot be swayed, no matter how many times they try. Your quiet, steady, unshakable consistency is what protects your peace and trains others to either respect your limits or leave. Confrontation may grab attention, but consistency commands respect. When you begin setting boundaries with toxic people, don't expect them to applaud your growth or quietly adjust to your new standards. Instead, expect resistance. Toxic people feed on control, chaos, and emotional reactions. The moment you take that away, they panic. Resistance is their attempt to pull you back into the role you once played, the role of being endlessly available, overly forgiving, and easy to manipulate. But here's the truth: if you hold your ground, resistance doesn't last forever. Over time, either respect or distance will follow, and both outcomes are victories. Resistance comes in many forms. Some toxic people use anger. They yell, criticize, or attack your character, hoping to intimidate you back into submission. Others use guilt. You've changed, you're selfish, or after all I've done for you. Some may use charm, suddenly being extra kind, making promises, or pretending to change, just to see if they can slip past your new boundaries. These reactions aren't signs you're doing something wrong. They're signs your boundaries are working. Their discomfort shows that your behavior is disrupting their control. Think of resistance like waves crashing against a new seawall. At first, the waves are strong and loud, testing every inch of the wall. But the wall doesn't need to fight back, it just needs to stand. With time, the waves lose their power, and the sea finds a new level. In the same way, your role is not to argue, justify, or fight toxic people when they resist. Your role is to stand firm, calmly, and consistently until the storm passes. Let's take a real life example. Suppose you have a relative who constantly criticizes your life choices. You set a boundary by saying, "I won't continue this conversation if it turns into criticism." The first time you enforce it, they might scoff, insult you harder, or accuse you of being too sensitive. That's resistance. If you fold and stay in the conversation, they win. But if you calmly walk away each time they criticize, eventually they realize their words no longer hold power. With time, either they stop criticizing respect or they stop talking to you as much distance. Both outcomes protect your peace. Respect doesn't always mean admiration. Sometimes it simply means toxic people learn that you are not someone they can manipulate. They may not like your boundaries, but they'll recognize you won't bend. That recognition changes the way they interact with you. For example, a toxic coworker may never become your friend, but they'll think twice before dumping their responsibilities on you. Once they realize you won't accept it, that's a form of respect, even if it's silent. What if they never respect your boundaries? That's where the second outcome comes in: distance. Some toxic people will leave your life entirely when they realize they can't control you anymore. At first, this might feel painful, especially if they were a family member, friend, or partner you hoped would change. But remember this: losing someone who disrespects you is not a loss, it's a gain. Distance is just as powerful as respect because it creates the same result: peace. The key to moving through resistance is emotional discipline. Toxic people want to provoke reactions. If you become defensive, angry, or guilty, they sense weakness. But when you remain calm, steady, and consistent, you strip their resistance of its power. Every time you respond with calm strength instead of chaos, you retrain them and retrain yourself. It's also worth noting that resistance is temporary, but respect or distance is lasting. Once toxic people see your boundaries are non-negotiable, they stop wasting energy trying to break them. They may test you occasionally, but the intensity fades. Over time, your life becomes quieter, your relationships healthier, and your confidence stronger. So don't be discouraged when toxic people push back against your boundaries. Resistance is not a sign you're failing, it's proof you're growing. Stay steady. With time, they'll either adapt to the new rules and give you respect, or they'll exit your life and give you freedom. Either way, you win. When people first hear about setting boundaries, they often focus only on what they'll lose. They worry about upsetting others, pushing people away, or ending relationships. But what many don't realize is that boundaries don't just repel toxic people. They also create the conditions for healthier, stronger, and more fulfilling relationships to grow. In fact, boundaries act like a filter. They push out what's harmful while drawing in what's nourishing. Think of boundaries as the rules of entry to your inner world. If your life is like a home, boundaries are the invitation-only policy at the door. Toxic people who thrive on disrespect and manipulation quickly realize they're not welcome when boundaries are enforced. But healthy people, those who value mutual respect, honesty, and kindness, see your boundaries as a sign of strength. Instead of running away, they lean in. They feel safer with you because they know where they stand. Let's break this down further. A toxic person thrives in chaos. They want blurred lines, endless second chances, and relationships where they can take without giving. When you set a boundary, such as "I will not tolerate disrespect" or "I won't engage in gossip," they lose interest because the game they want to play no longer works. Boundaries repel them naturally, not by force, but by incompatibility. On the other hand, a healthy person appreciates boundaries. Imagine telling a friend, "I need some alone time tonight, but let's catch up tomorrow." A toxic friend might accuse you of being distant or selfish. A healthy friend, however, will respect your need and maybe even admire your honesty. Your boundary signals that you value your own well-being, and that creates trust. They know you won't secretly resent them because you're clear about your needs up front. This honesty deepens the relationship. Boundaries also attract healthy people because they reveal your self-respect. People who respect themselves naturally attract others who respect them too. For instance, when you say no to unfair treatment at work, you may lose the favor of a toxic boss who exploits you. But you'll gain the admiration of colleagues who see your strength. That respect often leads to healthier professional relationships where mutual support replaces exploitation. Another benefit is that boundaries encourage reciprocity. In toxic dynamics, one person usually takes and the other gives until they're drained. In healthy dynamics, boundaries create balance. When you express your limits clearly, the other person feels safe to express theirs as well. For example, if you tell your partner, "I need quiet time in the evenings," they may feel more comfortable saying, "I need quality time together on weekends." Suddenly, the relationship isn't a tug of war. It's a dance of mutual respect. Boundaries also prevent resentment, which is a silent killer of relationships. Without boundaries, you may say yes when you want to say no, give when you're exhausted, or tolerate behavior that hurts you. Over time, this builds resentment, which poisons even good relationships. By setting boundaries early, you prevent that bitterness from forming. Healthy people appreciate this because it means the connection stays clean, honest, and sustainable. Perhaps the most powerful part is that boundaries change you. When you stop tolerating toxicity, you grow stronger, clearer, and more confident. That inner strength changes the energy you bring into the world. Instead of attracting people who want to exploit your weakness, you begin attracting people who value your strength. Relationships become less about survival and more about growth. Here's the beauty. The very same boundary that pushes toxic people away is the one that draws healthy people closer. When you say, I won't accept disrespect, manipulators leave, but respectful people stay. When you say, I need balance, users disappear, but givers remain. When you say, I need honesty, liars fade, but truth tellers come forward. Boundaries are both a filter and a magnet. So if you fear setting boundaries because you think you'll lose everyone, remember this. Boundaries don't cost you real relationships. They protect them. They may shrink your circle, but they'll strengthen it. The people who remain will be the ones who truly respect, value, and love you. Boundaries don't just remove the wrong people, they make space for the right ones. In the end, boundaries are not about pushing people out. They're about creating an environment where the right people can thrive with you. Toxicity fades away and respect, trust, and love take its place. And that's how boundaries transform not just your relationships, but your entire life.